Texas football's losing streak reaches 4 games. Texas basketball prepares for their season to tip off, and Texas volleyball falls for the first time all season. All this and more on College Press Box. Good evening and welcome into this week's episode of College Press Box. I'm your host, Jason Kinander. It was another busy week of sports on the 40 acres, so let's get right into our packed slate. On Saturday, Texas football traveled to Ames, Iowa, looking to once again avenge their losing streak. Unfortunately, the Longhorns fell short once again, seeing a 7-3 halftime lead be erased in the blink of an eye. Let's head down to Ames to see how it all played out. We begin with the second play from scrimmage when Casey Thompson gives the ball to Bijan Robinson, who is pushed forward for the first down, but not before he fumbles at the end of the run, scooped up by Iowa State, and they would return that deep into Texas territory for a good starting field position for Brock Purdy and the Cyclones to begin the night in Ames. The drive would finish with a 3-point field goal. And here's Texas again after Thompson is benched in favor of Hudson Carr. Carr leads the Longhorns all the way down for this Xavier-worthy touchdown. Unfortunately, this would be the only scoring for the game, as in the second half, first drive, first possession, Breece Hall from midfield evades Texas defenders, jukes and goes all the way to the house to put the Cyclones ahead 10-7. They would lead the rest of the way. Midfield again, next drive, setting up the trick play. It's Xavier Hutchinson delivering the strike to Tariq Milton for another Iowa State score. Texas getting burned by the trick play again, as here is Breece Hall towards the end of the third quarter, finding his way into the end zone, extending this thing to a 3-score game. Iowa State looking to ice the game in the end of the fourth quarter with this 51-yard field goal by Mevis. It would go down as the Longhorns' 4th consecutive loss, also 4th consecutive blown lead for Texas, as they fall below 500 for the first time all season. And I am now joined by our football analyst, Jordan Geelhoed. Thank you so much for joining us, Jordan.
Thank you for having me.
So how did it happen again? How did this happen for the 4th consecutive game Texas football blows a lead?
Well, we saw this last week against Baylor with Abram Smith. We saw this last month against OU with Kennedy Brooks. And we saw it again this week against Iowa State with Breece Hall. Texas simply can't stop the run. Hall is one of the best backs in the Big 12, one of the best backs in the nation. He is the motor of that entire Cyclones offense. If he does well, Iowa State does well. That means Texas's entire game plan on defense should have been about stonewalling Breece Hall, and they did in the first half to their credit. But as the game went on, Hall began to pick up steam. The battered defensive line couldn't hold him, and they couldn't get off the field, and he ended the day with 136 yards and 2 touchdowns. On the flip side of that, when it came to Texas's running game, the offense seems to forget about Bijan Robinson once they come out of halftime. Right, he still ended with a pretty good stat line. He accounted for 126 yards, but 87 of those came in the first half, and he was only given a handful of carries in the second. You'd think that Texas would want to feature its best offensive player, but they just don't late in the game.
Yeah, and it certainly doesn't help that there's a big question mark at the quarterback position. So with these 3 games remaining on the season, who would you go with at quarterback going forward?
It's a hard decision to make, seeing as neither of them have particularly impressed me this season. Casey Thompson sure looked good beating up on lesser opponents like Rice and Texas Tech, but when it comes to showing up in close games in clutch times, Thompson seems to disappear. Hudson Carr looked terrible against Arkansas earlier in the season. Maybe he just wasn't ready yet, but then he subbed in for Texas early on in this game, and he put up a really pedestrian stat line, throwing for just over 100 yards in that one short touchdown. And again, when Texas was playing from behind in the fourth quarter and needed to put points on the board, it was just a constant stream of 3-and-outs. They couldn't move the ball at all. I guess at this point in the season, Texas should prioritize development over winning, since they're definitely not looking at a Big 12 championship. So I guess Hudson Card would get the start going forward, but I don't feel good about either of them right now, especially behind this battered offensive line.
Completely agree, and you said that Texas won't be battling for a Big 12 championship, but a bowl game is still realistic. So can Texas expect even being bowl eligible?
I would say Texas fans can expect something, but I wouldn't expect anything good. They're far, far away from anything significant at this point, right? A 3rd straight Alamo Bowl would practically be a blessing right now. It only takes 6 wins, though, for a team to become bowl eligible, so Texas only needs 2 more, and thankfully the next 2 games are very winnable. They play Kansas, who has a 1-8 record and are last in the Big 12, and West Virginia, who has a 4-5 record and are 6th in the Big 12. Their last game against the 6-3 Kansas State Wildcats will be a bit tougher, but as long as they can win 2 of the 3, they can make a bowl. It's just a little bit disappointing when you have a program as large and as hyped up as the Texas Longhorns, playing someone like, I don't know, Boise State in like the Tax Slayer Bowl or something like that. Are they even eligible for the Tax Slayer Bowl? I don't know.
Probably not at this point. Jordan, always good to have you on with us tonight. When we return, we will be joined by Clark Dalton, who will preview the upcoming Texas men's basketball season. You won't want to miss it. Welcome back into College Press Box. Last Monday, the 5th-ranked Texas men's basketball team took on Division III Texas Lutheran in an exhibition game at the Frank Erwin Center. While the final result, a Longhorns blowout, might have been inevitable, the exhibition highlighted the depth and new additions to this Texas team. Let's take a look at the action. 2 minutes into the game, Andrew Jones misses a three, but it is cleaned up by Utah transfer Timmy Allen for his first bucket. Now another transfer, Trey Mitchell getting into the action with the top of the key three-pointer, as we see Mitchell getting involved here again early on in the first half, getting inside for this clean 2-point jump shot. Mitchell looking to be a big addition to this Longhorns team. Out on the break now, Jace Febres up to the aforementioned Allen for the big alley-oop finish. Here's Texas again attacking towards the rim. Jones kicks it out to freshman Jalen Tyson getting into the action with the smooth jump shot. The big-time former Texas Tech commit who recommitted to Texas following the hiring of Coach Beard. Here's Mitchell again working inside towards the end of the first half to extend the Texas lead. Another transfer, Marcus Carr, getting into the action to begin the second half. Here's Carr again working the ball around into Allen, who does the rest with this pretty move. As we take a look one more time, this game was far, far over in the second half, but Carr showing off the energy and the focus on this tip and steal and score. Texas would blow out Texas Lutheran in a game that really didn't mean much about the final score, more so about getting us ready for the season. And it is basketball season when we are joined by our men's basketball analyst, Clark Dalton. Clark, it is always a pleasure to be with you tonight.
And it's a pleasure to be with you too, Jason. Hey, basketball is back. It's exciting.
Basketball is back, and these Longhorns look like they could compete for a national championship. So a lot of new additions, the obvious one being the head coaching position. Shaka Smart out, Chris Beard in. What do you expect to be different with Coach Beard at the helm?
I think they're really different in terms of their philosophy as coaches and really their philosophy in terms of roster development. Because let's look at what the case was with Shaka. When Shaka was the head coach, he really emphasized athleticism and upside. We can see this with his bigs. He was always taking a big who was going to be a bit of a project, but you knew they could probably turn into a player. We saw that with Mo Bamba. We saw that with Greg Brown. We saw that with Kai Jones and Jackson Hayes. I think Chris Beard's a little bit different, where he emphasizes a more developed product. He wants a player who's more skilled, a little bit more experienced. So that's why he used the transfer portal. And I think that's really the biggest difference between the two. Also, I think Shaka's a little bit more calm. Beard seems like an intense guy. I think during his press conference, he said, I want to emphasize toughness at least 4 times. So I think it's going to be just like his Texas Tech team, which played with grit. And we'll see some players who eventually down the line will develop like Jarrett Culver did, who became a draft pick for the Minnesota Timberwolves.
Right. So we talked about Beard, the new coach. Beard brought in with him 6 transfers and Jalen Tyson, the highly touted recruit. Which of the new players you think are going to make the biggest impact for Texas?
I think a player who's going to make the biggest impact right away is Timmy Allen. Timmy Allen, to me, looks like an NBA player already because he has the length, he has the size, but also one thing that's kind of cool about Timmy Allen is usually sometimes when a wing comes into college, they're kind of just an athlete. They jump out of the gym, they're really, really quick, and they use that. But Timmy Allen has a good understanding of basketball. He's great at pivoting. He can operate in the low post a little bit, and he's really good at using fakes and using that rip-through move and getting to the basket. That's what I like about him. And he's even a pretty good rebounder. The only thing he really needs to work on right now is his jump shot. He hasn't shot over 40% from 3 since his freshman year. However, I think that can be fixed. He just needs to get his elbow in a little bit more. With all of those elements, he's going to be a great player for Texas this season.
Absolutely. So new players, new coach, but lofty expectations preseason number 5. Tell me, how far can this Texas team go?
Oh, Jason, you're coming at me with the hard questions already. We know that, there's always high expectations around Texas. I feel like if I say they're going to do well, they're not going to do well. So let's just tamper them a bit. I think the only problem with this team, there's only 2 problems with this team. Number 1 is the chemistry, because this is a true experiment with the transfer portal that we've never seen the likes of before. Marcus Carr, Timmy Allen, Trey Mitchell, Christian Bishop, all great players, but they've never played together before. And chemistry is just something that it takes time. You need to be hanging out with guys outside of practice and you only get a couple months to do that with this transfer portal experiment. It's kind of similar to what Kentucky does with the one and done. The only other thing I'm concerned about is their three-point shooting. Right now, they have some guys who have good shooting form, but just haven't been consistent shooters for some reason. And we know Jace Febres, he's still got that problem with the knee. Andrew Jones is a great shooter, but really he's the only one right now who I would count on at the end of a game. But that being said, this is a really talented team. These are what NBA players look like. Trey Mitchell, Timmy Allen, Marcus Carr. Those are guys who are probably going to have a chance to get drafted and play at the next level. So I think this is a team that I don't expect them to win the Big 12 just because I think Kansas is a little bit more loaded right now, and Baylor's pretty good too, but I think they will make the NCAA tournament, and we'll say they win 21 to 22 games.
Okay, yeah, to be completely honest with you, completely agree with that, but with your analysis, it's hard not to be excited for the season tip-off tomorrow. Thank you, as always, for joining us. When we return, we will talk to volleyball analyst Chloe Figueroa, who will tell us about last weekend's battle with Baylor. You won't want to miss it. Welcome back into College Press Box. On Saturday, top-ranked Texas volleyball did something that they had not done yet this season, and that is they lost a game. The previously unbeaten Longhorns fell to Baylor in Waco, giving them their first loss of the season. And now we are joined by volleyball analyst Chloe Figueroa. Chloe, thank you for joining us.
I'm glad to be here.
So what did the games against Baylor tell you about Texas?
Well, as we know, Texas took their first loss of the season to Baylor. While it is a heartbreaking loss, I think it tells us that Texas isn't invincible, and I think that's a good thing. I believe that Texas needed this loss. I see it as it's better to lose now than in the playoffs. Even though they've been winning games, the sets have been closer than they needed to be. This loss against Baylor really shows what Texas has to work on, and they now realize that when these errors are exposed, that they can be beaten. However, with that being said, I don't think Texas fans should push the panic button. They aren't Texas football. They're not going to lose 4 in a row. They're going to look at the film, see what they need to work on, whether it be their offense, their defense, service errors. And they're going to come back strong. I believe they're going to finish the Big 12 play off strong and then get ready for bracket play.
Completely agree with what you said about how it's good to get a loss now before the tournament. So, what do you expect from Texas in these last couple of conference games before the conference tournament?
Like I said, they're going to come out, finish strong. Even though you never want to underestimate their opponents, Texas has a few easy games. They play Oklahoma at home, a great rivalry game, and can be a good statement game for Texas. With wins over Oklahoma, they can bring that momentum back that they lost from Baylor. Then they play Kansas State, which should be another easy win for them. You know, they haven't lost to Kansas State since the 2003 season. And finally, they play Texas Tech, a good in-state matchup. Always good to see them play another Texas team. And sorry about that. Winning the last few games of the season, going into bracket play with momentum, I think they can easily turn around this loss from Baylor.
Yeah, it'd be good to see the Longhorns win the last couple games of the season, get that momentum back. So who is going to be the X factor for this Longhorn team going into bracket play?
While most people would say Logan Eggleston being the X factor, I think the X factor actually comes down to who's going to help her lead this team far into the playoffs. And right now, I think that player is Skylar Fears. Currently, she's second in kills behind Logan Eggleston and is also averaging 4 points per set, also right behind Eggleston in that set. We can argue that she's the second best player on this team, and she's been a great offensive asset. All eyes are going to be on Logan, and all the teams are going to try to stop her. And I think Fields can step in and easily bring offensive pressure off of Eggleston and create more offensive plays for everyone. Overall, she's been an outstanding player for this Texas team that has been a key component of why Texas is 18-0 on the season. So I think she's the X factor.
Getting that one loss still doesn't quite feel right, but
doesn't.
Thank you for joining us, Chloe. Always nice to talk a little volleyball. When we return, we will take a look at how some former Longhorns fared in the NFL. You won't want to miss it. And welcome back into College Press Box. It was another big Sunday for Texas X's all across the National Football League as former Texas quarterback Colt McCoy had a massive performance for the Arizona Cardinals in the absence of star quarterback Kyler Murray, completing 22 of 26 passes for 249 yards and a touchdown. Devin Duvernay had a clutch 5-yard touchdown for the Baltimore Ravens to tie their game against Minnesota in the fourth. We'll have more on that in a moment. Caden Stearns recorded his second interception of his rookie season, picking off Dallas Cowboys quarterback Dak Prescott. And finally, one of our favorites here in Austin, Ravens kicker Justin Tucker hitting a game-winning 36-yard field goal to complete Baltimore's comeback over Minnesota in overtime. Soccer fell to TCU in the Big 12 championship game on Sunday. The Longhorns led 1-0 at the halftime intermission, but thank you to an Ashlyn Miller goal, but a pair of second-half Horned Frog goals would complete the TCU comeback. The Longhorns will play SMU in the first round of the NCAA tournament in Dallas on Friday. And Texas baseball announced their 2022 schedule on Thursday. The Longhorns will open up the season on February 18th at home against Rice and will play 31 home games throughout the season. Highlight games include a home series against Alabama in March, a weekend series on the road against SEC powerhouse South Carolina, and a March 29th make that home game against Texas A&M. Texas women's basketball defeated Oklahoma Baptist 77-44 in an exhibition game on Thursday night. Senior Audrey Warren recorded 16 points, while sophomore Femi Masudi grabbed a team-high 11 rebounds. The 25th-ranked Longhorns will open their season tomorrow at home against New Orleans at the Irwin Center. And then top-ranked men's swim and dive dominated number 9 Virginia over the weekend in Charlottesville as Texas set 4 Virginia pool records en route to their 3rd win of the season. Jake Foster took home the individual breaststroke title while setting a pool record with his 200 IM time of 1:44.66. This week in Longhorn sports on Tuesday, both men's and women's basketball will tip off their seasons at the Irwin Center, with women's basketball taking on New Orleans at 5:30 and men's basketball taking on Houston Baptist at 8. Both games will be broadcast on Longhorn Network. On Thursday and Friday, volleyball will play host to Oklahoma Gregory Gym, with both of those matches being able to be seen on Longhorn Network at 7 p.m. On Friday, soccer will face off against SMU in the first round of the NCAA tournament, the time still being TBD. While women's tennis will take on Texas A&M in College Station this weekend, an event that will run from Friday to Sunday. And on Saturday, Texas football will look to halt their 4-game losing streak when the Kansas Jayhawks come to town at 6:30 at Darrell K. Royal Stadium in a game that can be seen on ESPNU. And finally, Texas men's basketball will head all the way up to Spokane to take on the preseason #1 Gonzaga Bulldogs in a top 5 matchup that will tip off at 9:30 p.m. will be shown on ESPN2. And that will do it for College Press Box tonight. Shout out to our analysts, production, and all those in Master Control who make this show possible each and every week. Please do not forget to tune into College Crossfire, hosted by our very own Drew Jacob at 9 p.m. on Wednesday, as well as the 1-0 Sports Show this Friday morning at 11 a.m. As always, thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Jason Kinander. Have a great night.